Shalom to the elect of Israel, to the hopefully elect of Israel, you Hebrew Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indian, and Haitians. Gotta give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, the Most High, the Heavenly Father. His Hebrew name is Yahweh, not Yahweh, not Jehovah, not God, not Elohim, not Most High, not Lord, not Yah, not Jah. It's Yahweh. His only begotten Son name in the Hebrew is Yahweh Shai, not Yahshua, not Yeshua, not Jesus Christos, not Jesus Christ, not Serapis Christus, not Yeshaya, not Yehoshua, not Yeshua. It's Yahweh Shai. So we gotta give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rekah, Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well, and a sincere salutation to all our can pushing this truth and believing this truth throughout the four winds of the earth and the entire world, waking up the hope for the elect. And shalom to the Agua who are listening and learning, the few sisters who are listening and learning. I'm Isaiah from the GMS Orlando Camp, coming into another lesson in true facts, faith, and edification, another daily edification. Lord's willing, let's be edified. And this is the separation. This is a clip from RT News, and it's titled China Fights Back Against U.S. Plans to Weaponize Dollar. They back at it again, man. There's always something going on with these nations, with the separation of the sons of men and sons of the wicked. There's always something going on with the sons of men and the sons of the wicked. Lord, witness be edified. This is for educational purposes only.
Okay, hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez, and I want to welcome all of you who are watching us right now from all over the world, whether you're watching on your regular cable or TV provider or the portable TV app. This is the video image that is being talked about all over the world. Look at that. That's a statue of former U.S. President Andrew Jackson being lassoed by protesters in an effort to pull it down. The White House then sent in federalized police to push the protesters back. The story, an explanation of why Andrew Jackson is so reviled. And all of this is coming up right here. But we're going to begin with a bold declaration by China that seems to imply that it simply had enough with, quote, U.S. threats to interfere and will now move forward to de-dollarize and strike back against the United States by creating a global currency to compete with the U.S. dollar. China has long considered joining Russia in fighting back against U.S. control of the world's ability to trade or transfer goods without U.S. interference or say-so. But now China is announcing that it's actually preparing to be cut off from the U.S. financial system, and they're taking what appears to be real steps to protect itself. Why? Or maybe the better question is, why now? Okay? The reason is that while the United States has been heavy-handed in the past, it has never, according to China and Chinese experts and officials, gone so far as to weaponize the U.S. dollar the way that the Trump administration is doing so and threatening to do so now. See, that's why China says that it's doing what it's doing. Even if it shakes up the entire global market, it says it's necessary as a defensive move. One of China's top economic officials seems to be saying that the time for talking is over and now it's time to act. Here's the quote.
Now, I'm going to read this. This is Genesis 27 and verse 39. It reads, And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above, and by the sword shall thou live, Okay? By the sword should thou live. So these nations are complaining because they use the sword to weaponize the dollar, man. That's why when you read Obadiah 1 and 7, just the point of the scripture, it reads, they that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. See, you made all these countries eat your bread, adapt your dollar. And it go on, man. On and every day, every week. These nations is fed up with this currency that is not backed by anything, man.
We have to make preparations early, real preparations, not just psychological preparations. You see, what Fang Xinghai is expressing in that fear is that the Trump administration will do to them what previous administrations have done to Russia with sanctions that have literally locked them out of the world community. What does that mean? Well, what it means is not allowing Russia to exchange goods or currency with other countries. That's a destabilizing thing to do to a country. That type of weaponization of the dollar would be tantamount, figuratively speaking, of course, to an economic nuclear strike, one that would cause unimaginable repercussions, not just in China, but obviously worldwide when China tries to strike back. How serious is the United States about weaponizing the dollar to punish China? How serious and how capable is China in its threat to strike back? This is an important story. If you want to be ahead of the curve in understanding this precarious scenario that could affect you, me, and just about everybody else on the planet, then you'll want to stay tuned as we drill down here on the News with Rick Sanchez, where we're committed, as we often say, to the axiom that it's time to do news again. And here we go, the list of the questions we think you'll be asking tomorrow. How serious are China and the U.S. in their threats of economic warfare? Is Libya once again descending into chaos as the site of an international proxy war? And what is the state of airfare in America right now? But let's go ahead and begin with this, with China and what it's saying, to try and drill down on whether both what they fear and what they're planning to do about that fear is likely. Is the U.S. planning to further weaponize the U.S. dollar by sanctioning China to cut them off from the rest of the global economy? Is China capable of striking back by rallying the world around perhaps its own cause and currency? Joining me now to answer these questions is the co-host of Boom Bust, Christy I. She's the host of Boom Bust and a global market analyst to take us through this. Christy, let's start with China, because I mentioned and what it fears. I mentioned a while ago that the United States has punished other countries, Russia being one of those. But China seems to fear that the United States is going to go even further than it did with Russia. Explain that to us.
Well, China right now is being very proactive, and is, as you said earlier when you opened up, is taking a defensive stance right now to prepare for the possibility of being cut off from the U.S. dollar payment system in case the U.S. sanctions Chinese companies and banks. And right now, this is perceived as a real risk from China's standpoint because they are quite vulnerable. The U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency, and all trade is conducted in it. So as such, China mainly relies on the U.S. dollar payment system in most of its international dealings. So we've already seen last year China attempted to trade and settle trades with its neighbors in Russia and India in their own native currencies. And while those test runs were quite successful, it was still on a very small scale. So China is quickly realizing this is a very big vulnerability if things take a nasty turn. So right now they're trying to shift away and be less dependent on the US dollar. But at the same time, this is a very double-edged sword because this move by the U.S. would be perceived as a nuclear option to cut China out of the financial market, to cut it out of the SWIFT network. That will have severe blowbacks on the global economy because cutting China off from SWIFT would be economic suicide. The U.S. currently runs about $350 billion in annual trade deficit with Beijing, and the PBOC holds over $1 trillion in U.S. debt. So the U.S. really can't do without trade with China, then China can do without trade with the U.S.
So it's one thing for the United States to put sanctions on a country and some of its banks, for example. I think that's what happened with Russia, for example. But when they knock you off of SWIFT, that's a much more difficult blow, right? Explain what happens when you get knocked off of SWIFT. What happens to a country? What can it not do?
It essentially means that you are cut off from the entire global monetary network. It means you have no access to liquidity, you have no access to the dollar reserve. You can't send international payments and settlements or pay for anything that are currently settled in US dollar. And most of global international trade currently is denominated in US dollar. That includes oil, that includes agricultural goods, that includes basic supply, food, necessity, materials, energy, all of the above. All of that is currently denominated in US dollars. So that would be a very severe blow. And one of the things that you mentioned with Venezuela, even though the U.S. previously and historically has sanctioned other nations, they cut them off temporarily, as was the case with Iran. It massively hurt their economies. But one of the biggest detriments is the fact that in order to completely cut a country off, other countries have to also comply with the ban. So this is the case with China. If the US wanted to even kick China out of the SWIFT network, people are saying it is highly unlikely because the US would have to get the EU on board to endorse and follow these sanctions. And there's absolutely no reason why the EU would do that when it would hurt their economy. China, as it has proven in this entire coronavirus episode, proved itself to be the manufacturing hub of the world, and they service the EU. So there's no way they would give that up over a dispute that doesn't even involve them.
So what would happen to me as a consumer or a citizen of the United States if tomorrow this kind of situation developed? I mean, we've called it the nuclear option. The United States continues to weaponize the dollar. China finally says we've had enough and does what? And what would be the effect on us?
Well, China right now is not necessarily, as you mentioned, is not creating a different currency. They're trying to just lessen their exposure, and by doing that, they're creating a gold-backed RMB denominated in oil futures contract. So this is essentially a competitor to the SWIFT network, which allows them to send payments internationally and settle trades in their own native currency. So if US were to suddenly blow up and just not have any trade with China whatsoever, that would mean that goods for you as a consumer, an American consumer, that would mean goods. Prices of goods would rise exponentially, even more so than the case it was last year with the tariffs.
So we'd be talking about a level of inflation that we haven't seen in, I imagine, quite some time, because the goods would have to be made somewhere else and they'd be more costly, correct?
Absolutely. And in China, while it would certainly wreak havoc on their financial system, because as you can imagine, the Shanghai Exchange, the Hong Kong Hang Seng, those are two of the biggest, largest indexes. And the Hang Seng even outranked the NASDAQ last year. So if you take a look at just the global markets and the amount of capital and liquidity that flows through China each and every day, that is going to wreak complete havoc on how trades are going to be settled.
Seems like something we probably then don't want to see happen for the good of both sides. Christy, thank you so much. Good stuff. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So now Libya has become the center for a proxy war. You see, some in the international community are calling for a ceasefire and peace negotiations, as others continue to encourage, well, a conflict in what is already a war-torn nation. We've been following this story here on this newscast for quite some time. Here's an update from Alex Mihalovich.
It was a country that boasted one of the highest standards of living in Africa. According to Pan-African news platform The African Exponent, under President Muammar Gaddafi, in Libya, education, healthcare, and even electricity were all free for citizens. Farmers enjoyed a high level of support from the government, mothers were taken care of after giving birth, bank loans were interest-free, a home was deemed a natural human right, and the literacy rate jumped from 25% to 75% under Gaddafi. But then along came NATO. In 2011, alliance forces backed a rebellion against Gaddafi's government. That war came to an end when the country's leader was tortured and killed by Western-backed rebels on October 20th, 2011. A gruesome scene, applauded by some.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
And why did they do that? Because he didn't want to adapt to the petrodollar, man. He didn't want to fall under that monetary system of Babylon the Great. So they put the man to death.
But it's hard to overlook the fact that chaos has continued in Libya to this day. A variety of players have struggled to control the oil-rich nation. The two most prominent are military commander Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army, which has the backing of the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, France, and Russia, and the Tripoli-based government of National Accord, which is supported by the UN, Qatar, Italy, and Turkey. Officially, Libya is under an arms embargo, but somehow weapons keep pouring in. This Monday, Turkey and Italy announced that they are working together to stop the flow. Here's Italy's foreign minister.
If we stop the arrival of arms or we severely limit the entrance, we will be able to reduce the aggressiveness of the two Libyan sides in this conflict.
The same day, France accused its NATO ally Turkey of violating the weapons embargo.
I already had the opportunity to clearly say it to President Erdogan. I consider today that Turkey plays in Libya a dangerous game and is in breach of all commitments it took during the Berlin Conference.
With alliance members going head-to-head in regard to Libya, the French president reiterated his statement from last year, calling NATO brain-dead once again. Turkish military interference in Libya has helped the government of National Accord achieve recent gains on the ground, making the situation even more complicated. This past weekend, Egypt's president warned that if Turkish-backed pro-GNA forces advance on the strategic city of Sirte, it could provoke a direct intervention by Cairo.
See, all this is going on around the world, man. This back and forth, the separation, man. The separation of the sons of men and the sons of the wicked, man. This is all happening because of the sons of the wicked, man. Because they rule nations with the sword. This is Habakkuk 2:8. Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, of the city, and of all that dwell therein. This is Isaiah 10:1. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed. See, these laws is coming from the sons of the wicked, man. They are destroying nations with their monetary system, with their way of life, man. With their policies, their legislations, their democracy, their philosophy. They draconian laws, man. Isaiah 24:5. The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore have the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men left. What we got going on is, this is the separation, man, that the Lord mentioned in Daniel, the 2nd chapter, which I'm going to read.
The Turkish-backed GNA has called the announcement a declaration of war.
See?
With tension high, many nations, including the US and Russia, are calling for an immediate ceasefire.
We stressed the need for an early ceasefire in Libya and agreed on urging Libyan political forces to engage in constructive dialogue as soon as possible.
If Egypt was provoked to follow through on its threat, it would bring the conflict to a new level. The battleground that has already become an international arena could easily spread into a regional war. For News with Rick Sanchez, I'm Alex Mihailovich.
Is the news with Rick Sanchez. You're watching our special coverage. I'm going to be right back with a follow-up story to one that we brought you just a couple of weeks ago concerning Iran and what it's doing right in our own backyard.
And you see what's going on, man. It's the separation, man, of these nations. Separation, man.
Mostly in fuel. The latest shipment is food, some of which will be used to open.
No, it's a lot. Let me back up a little bit.
sanctions by sending a new shipment of goods and supplies to the people of Venezuela. Unlike the previous cargoes, which were mostly in fuel, the latest shipment is food, some of which will be used to open Venezuela's first Iranian supermarket. RT correspondent John Huddy files this story.
The Iranian cargo ship Gulsan, shown here in this photo that the Iranian embassy in Caracas released over the weekend, arrived to the port of La Guaira on Venezuela's coast Sunday, bringing with it food, medical supplies, and reportedly even COVID-19 testing kits. The Iranian embassy in Caracas tweeted that the food will be used to open the, quote, first Iranian supermarket in Venezuela, adding that it will be another success in friendly and fraternal relations between two countries. Perhaps, but it's certainly likely to irk U.S. officials, including Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and President Trump. The U.S. continues to sanction both Iran and Venezuela. And this past March, the Trump administration also indicted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and several of his current and former top administration officials on drug trafficking charges, even sending U.S. Navy ships to the Caribbean to intercept cocaine smugglers from South America and, according to administration officials, Venezuela. So far, U.S. officials haven't commented on the Iranian cargo ship arriving in Venezuela to reportedly set up the first Iranian supermarket in the country. But President Trump continues to take aim at Maduro, tweeting this June 22nd. Unlike the radical left, I will always stand against socialism and with the people of Venezuela. My administration has always stood on the side of freedom and liberty and against the oppressive Maduro regime.
You hear what he just said? Did you see what he just said? He tweeted, my administration has always stood on the side of freedom and liberty and against the oppressive Maduro regime. Who has been more oppressive than Babylon the Great, man? Who? There's no other nation outside of Babylon the Great that has been the more oppressing city, man. This is Daniel 2:40. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdue all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they, talking about the seeds of the wicked, shall mingle themselves with the seeds of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is mixed with miry clay. And that's what we got going on, man. And there's always been a separation. You had way back in the Civil Wars, man, with the French, British, and you had the French, British, and Slovakia, the French, the British, and the Spaniards, man. Okay, fighting against who? the Babylonians, man. So there's always been the Job 9 and 24s going against amongst themselves, man. This is Nahum 3:1. Woe to the bloody city. It is all full of lies and robbery. The prey departeth not, which is you Negro, Latino, Native Americans, West Indian and Haitians, man. See, these nations, as it say in Isaiah, let's read that real quick. Isaiah 31:1. It reads this. Woe to them, no Salakia, wrong chapter. What is that? Let me finish playing this and I'm gonna find it real quick.
I would only meet with Maduro to discuss one thing: a peaceful exit from power. So far, that meeting has yet to take place and more than likely will not happen anytime soon. We'll keep you posted on that. But back to the Iranian cargo ship, which can carry up to 23,000 tons. Well, it was also said to be carrying parts to help repair Venezuela's collapsed oil refineries. Earlier this month, the Trump administration threatened to sanction as many as 50 Iranian oil and fuel tankers in an effort to cut off trade between Iran and Venezuela after Iranian cargo ships delivered 1.5 million barrels of fuel to Venezuela this past May. For the news with Rick Sanchez, John Huddy.
This Isaiah 33:1. Cause this is what happened, man. Woe to thee that spoilest, and thou was not spoiled, and dealest treacherously, and they dealt not treacherously with thee. When thou shalt cease to spoil, thou shalt be spoiled. And when thou shalt make an end to deal treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee. So you see, by them using their sword, they made the other nations adapt the petrodollar, right? Fall under their monetary system, or else get put down, man. This is how the Babylonians roll. This is how the Job 9-24s get down, man.
There's also a political tie to this story. Great report there, John. But you know what I want to do? I want to bring in former MP George Galloway into this conversation. Because, boy, wouldn't you know it, there's an election coming up in the United States, and apparently Mr. Mazirs, Biden and Trump are poking each other on the issue of Venezuela about who will be tougher and more anti-communist when it comes to Venezuela. Things sometimes never change. George, what do you make of this?
You got to read this real quick. This is 2nd Ezra 11 in verse 39, and it reads, "Are not thou it that remainest of the fourth beast, which I just read in Daniel 2:40? Are not thou it that remainest of the fourth beast, whom I made to reign in my world, that the end of their times may come through them? And the fourth came and overcame all the beasts that were past, and had power over the world with great fearfulness, and over the whole compass of the earth with much wicked oppression. And so long time dwelt he upon the earth with deceit. For the earth hast thou not judged with truth, for thou hast afflicted the meek, thou hast hurt the peaceable, thou hast loved liars, and destroyed the dwellings of them that brought forth fruit, and hast cast down the walls of such as did thee no harm. Therefore is thy wrongful dealings come up unto the highest." Same thing is said in Isaiah. Same thing is said in Revelation 18 and Jeremiah 51. Therefore is thy wrongful dealings come up to the highest. Right? Your sins have reached into heaven, man. And thy pride unto the mighty. Obadiah 1:3. The proud thou have deceived thee. The highest also have looked upon the proud times, and behold, they are ended, and his abominations are fulfilled. That's why I said what in Luke. What did it say? Luke 21 and 24 reads, "And they shall fall by the sword, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword." Talking about the Israelites, they had to flee. The ones that didn't flee, they got caught up, "and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." Back in 2nd Ezra 11, is that not what it just said? 2nd Ezra 11. 2nd Ezra 11:44. "The highest also have looked upon the proud times, and behold, they are ended." This is a future prophecy. "And his abominations are fulfilled. And therefore appear no more thy eagle, nor thy horrible wings, nor thy wicked feathers, nor thy malicious heads," right? The 7 heads, nor thy hurtful claws, nor all thy vain body, that all the earth may be refreshed, same thing it said in Isaiah, and may return being delivered from the violence, and that she may hope for the judgment and mercy of him that made her. When you go to Isaiah 14 and verse 5, it reads, The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, Babylon the Great, the Job 9:24. He that ruled the nations in anger is persecuted and none hindereth. Because it had to tell you in 2nd Ezra, the Lord is he that will letteth, okay, until he be moved out the way. The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. What I just read in 2nd Ezra 11 in the last chapter, man, the last verse. It said, Yet the fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedar of the Lebanon says, Thou art laid down, no fellows come up against thee, against us. Hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirred up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It have raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. All they shall speak and say unto thee, Art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the nose of thy vows, the worms is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. Because of the violence, because you done spoiled many nations, man. This is the wickedness. This is the separation of the sons of the wicked and the sons of men. They will mingle, but they would not cleave together, man.
Well, it's official. Donald Trump is the peace candidate. We know from John Bolton and we now know from Joe Biden that both of those are much hungrier for a harder line against America's enemies than President Donald Trump. They are disappointed with Trump. He hasn't started any new wars. He's withdrawn forces from several theaters, and they fear that in a second term, he would live up to his pre-election promise of ending America's everlasting, never-ending entanglement in foreign wars. And John Bolton's been presented with his pussy hat. He's now officially in the liberal camp. Who'd have thunk it, Rick?
Hey, let me tell you something about American politics that maybe you don't know. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my backyard. I'm from South Florida, being Miami, Fort Lauderdale, that region. The only way that you can become president of the United States these days is to win the state of Florida. To win the state of Florida, you have to win South Florida. To win South Florida, you have to convince the Venezuelans and the Cuban exiles who left Cuba and Venezuela and El Salvador and Nicaragua, all who live there, that you're more anti-communist than anybody. So Clinton did it. Bush did it. This want-to-be President Biden is now doing it. Trump did it when he ran for president. They go to Miami, they give a stump speech saying, I will free your country, I'm more anti-communist than anybody else, vote for me. And then they never go back there again, except 1 month until the next election. That's just the way it works, George. I mean, some of this is just politicking, right?
Yes, but what you've just demonstrated earlier is the iron law of unintended consequence. The sanctions against Iran have pushed Iran into the Russian orbit. The sanctions against Russia pushed Russia as close as can be, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, with China. Now the sanctions on Iran and Venezuela have pushed Iran and Venezuela together. And you now have the delights to look forward to of shopping in an Iranian supermarket in downtown Caracas. The plan to cut China out of the SWIFT system will swiftly lead to China and Russia coming up with a new payment system which cuts out the dollar and the United States. Careful what you wish for. That's something that I learned in politics a long, long time ago, Rick.
You know, it's interesting when you were saying that, I was almost going to say, you missed one. The sanctions and embargo against Cuba pushed Cuba into Venezuela's embracing arms, which is what started the triad that you just explained. What a wonderful conversation, as usual. with my friend George Galloway. Thank you, George. Appreciate it. Be careful what you wish for. Finally, the image that is being seen and talked about around the world, and here it is, once again. That's a statue of Andrew Jackson, a U.S. president, known as much of anything for his cruelty to Native Americans. Last night, protesters threatened and actually attempted to tear his iconic statue in front of the White House until federal police were sent in to push them back. In the end, a small but vocal crowd dispersed. However, by then, the video of these protesters, again threatening the statue of a former president near the White House, seemed ominous to the entire world. Now I want to give you a little context. Here's a historic
That's the Indian killer. That's what they called him.
point about Andrew Jackson. Despite the fact that he was renowned for his skills as a war general, courageous indeed, he was also responsible when he became president for the Trail of Tears, as it was called,
Facts.
which was the forced removal of Cherokee Creek and Seminole Indians from their lands when gold was found there.
Right.
It was horrible. It was mean. It was nasty. Jackson was responsible for the deaths of thousands when he sent in federal troops to push them out, even though the Supreme Court had ruled against it, saying it was illegal to do so. But he did it anyway. That's the history. That's the situation.
Lord willing is edifying. Gotta give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shah, Bahashim Rikah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who rule well, who teach well. And sincere salutation to all the ark and pushing this truth and believing this truth throughout the four ends of the earth, the entire world, waking up the hopefully elect. Shalom to the Wafu, I listen and learning. Lord willing is edifying. Until next time, I say Shalom, Wah Abad Babal. Just showing you how there's separation. They shall mingle with the seeds of men, but they will not cleave one to another. Shalom.